My beloved child, something has shifted behind the scenes, and your soulmate has just uncovered a detail they never expected to find. Stay with me, because the gray-haired man they once considered a complete mystery is no longer a stranger in this story. His identity has finally started to make sense, but the greater revelation is why his attention keeps returning to you. For some time, your soulmate noticed small clues that seemed disconnected. A name mentioned at an unusual moment. A conversation that suddenly became quiet. A question about you that sounded ordinary but somehow carried deeper meaning. Your soulmate kept wondering, who is this man, and why does he seem to know something about you? Then one missing piece appeared, and everything rearranged itself. Don't skip this moment, because the first discovery was not what your soulmate expected. The gray-haired man was connected to something much older than the situation unfolding today. He knew about a decision, an opportunity, and a path that existed long before your soulmate understood its importance. And when your name entered the conversation, his reaction made one thing unmistakably clear: he had heard about you before. But from whom? That is where the mystery becomes extraordinary. Your soulmate began asking careful questions, expecting simple answers. Instead, every answer opened another door. The man wasn't interested in appearances, popularity, or anything temporary. He had become curious about the way you think, the way you continue moving forward when circumstances change, and something you carry naturally that other people may have overlooked. Stay a little longer. The next detail changes the meaning of everything. Your soulmate discovered that this gray-haired man has been watching for a particular kind of person. Someone capable of recognizing an opportunity that others might walk straight past. Someone who doesn't need to be the loudest person in the room to make an impact. And somehow, through a chain of conversations your soulmate never knew was happening, your name reached him. Think about that. What if something you considered ordinary about yourself has quietly been opening doors you cannot see yet? Your soulmate felt the same question rising inside them. Then the gray-haired man said something unexpected. He didn't ask, "Where is this person?" He asked something far more intriguing. "Do they know yet?" Your soulmate froze for a second, not because the words were frightening, but because they suggested there was information still missing. Know what? That question became impossible to ignore. And here is where you need to stay till the end of this story, because your soulmate has only uncovered the first layer. The gray-haired man's identity explains how he knows about you, but it does not completely explain why he wants to meet you. There is another reason. A reason connected to a choice that could reshape the direction of something important in your future. Your soulmate is beginning to understand it now. The scattered clues are finally forming one picture, and the strangest part is this: the gray-haired man may not be arriving to change who you are. He may be arriving because of who you have already become. And just before your soulmate learned the full reason, one final detail surfaced, something nobody had mentioned until now. The gray-haired man had been given two names. Yours. And someone else's. But after learning something specific about you, he crossed one name off his list. Only yours remained. Here is where the picture suddenly changes, because your soulmate did not expect to learn why the second name disappeared. They assumed the gray-haired man had simply made a practical choice. Maybe he compared two people, considered their qualities, and selected you. But that explanation collapsed the moment your soulmate heard what had actually happened. The man had asked one unusual question about both names: which one stayed true to themselves when nobody was watching? And somehow, the answer led directly to you. Stay a little longer, because this is where your soulmate began seeing you differently too. They remembered moments when you could have followed everyone else but chose your own direction. Moments when your progress seemed invisible, yet you kept becoming wiser, calmer, and more certain about what mattered. Things you thought nobody noticed had apparently created an impression far beyond your immediate world. But one question remained: who exactly is this gray-haired man? Your soulmate kept searching for that answer until a conversation revealed something astonishing. He wasn't a random observer. He was someone connected to an opportunity that had quietly existed in the background for years, an experienced guide known for recognizing potential before everyone else could see it clearly. And he wasn't searching for perfection. He was searching for readiness. Don't skip what comes next, because those two things are completely different. Perfection waits until everything looks flawless. Readiness means being willing to grow when the right door finally appears. The gray-haired man believed you possessed that second quality. Your soulmate discovered that he had heard stories about how you handled uncertainty, how you learned from difficult seasons, and how you continued looking forward rather than allowing yesterday to define tomorrow. Then your soulmate found something even stranger. The man had apparently said, "I don't want them to become someone else. I want them to realize what they already carry." Those words stayed with your soulmate. Why would someone they had never properly understood speak about you with such certainty? What did he see? And more importantly, what opportunity required someone exactly like you? You might miss the turning point if you leave here, because the answer begins with something your soulmate originally dismissed as coincidence. Months earlier, the gray-haired man had received information about a future project, responsibility, or opening that would eventually require someone with a very particular mindset. Several people could technically qualify. Yet he believed qualifications alone wouldn't be enough. He wanted someone who could see possibilities where others saw ordinary circumstances. And your name kept returning. If this story is connecting with you, you can share it with someone who loves mysteries like this. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you can continue the journey when the next piece unfolds. Because your soulmate has now discovered who the gray-haired man is connected to. But they still haven't told you the biggest part. Why does he want you, specifically? Something huge is waiting for you in that answer. Your soulmate finally received another clue when the man requested one thing before meeting you. Not your achievements. Not a photograph. Not a long explanation of your past. He asked for a single story about a decision you once made when the easier path was available. Your soulmate immediately knew which moment he meant. And when they told him what happened, the gray-haired man became quiet. Then he smiled and said, "Good. Then I was right about them." But your soulmate wasn't satisfied anymore. They finally asked him directly. "Right about what?" The gray-haired man looked toward them as though this was the question he had been waiting for. His answer was only 6 words. "They're ready for the next door." And your soulmate had absolutely no idea what that door was. Not yet. But the next door was not a place, it was a choice, and your soulmate realized that almost too late. For hours, those 6 words kept circling through their mind: they're ready for the next door. Ready for what? Why had the gray-haired man spent so much time learning about you before saying anything directly? Your soulmate expected the answer to involve some grand external opportunity, but what they discovered was far more personal. The gray-haired man explained that certain turning points do not arrive with announcements. They appear quietly, disguised as conversations, unexpected introductions, new ideas, or decisions that initially seem too small to matter. And he believed one of those turning points was approaching you. Stay till the end, because your soulmate then heard the detail that connected every clue from the beginning. Years of experience had taught this man to recognize people standing at the edge of a major transition. Not because he could magically predict their future, but because he noticed patterns, curiosity becoming stronger, priorities changing, old limitations losing their influence, and a person beginning to imagine possibilities they once dismissed. He had heard those patterns in stories about you. Suddenly, your soulmate understood why the man kept asking about your choices instead of your achievements. He wasn't interested in what you had already collected. He wanted to understand how you think when the path ahead is unclear. And then came the revelation nobody had expected. The mysterious opportunity was not something the gray-haired man wanted to simply hand you. He wanted to introduce you to something, a possibility, a connection, an idea, that could expand what you believed was possible for your future. But there was a condition. Not a test. Not a demand. A choice. You would have to decide for yourself whether the next chapter actually belonged to you. Don't skip this part, because your soulmate immediately asked, "Why go through all this effort for them?" The gray-haired man paused. Then he revealed the missing connection. Someone from his past had once been given a similar opportunity and ignored it because they believed they weren't ready. Years later, that experience taught him something he never forgot. Sometimes talented people don't need someone to choose their future for them. They simply need someone to show them that another door exists. That was why he wanted you. Not to control your direction. Not to rewrite your identity. But to place a possibility in front of you and allow you to decide what happens next. Your soulmate felt something change inside them after hearing this. Until that moment, they had been focused entirely on discovering who the gray-haired man was. Now they understood the bigger question wasn't about him at all. It was about you. What would you do if an unexpected opportunity appeared before you? Would you recognize it? Would you trust everything you've learned? Would you allow yourself to explore a future larger than the one you previously imagined? Before you go, hear this line carefully: the gray-haired man never claimed to know exactly what your future would become. He simply recognized potential. And perhaps that is the greatest revelation of this entire mystery. Sometimes the person who changes your direction isn't the person who gives you all the answers. Sometimes they are simply the person who asks the question that awakens something already waiting inside you. But your soulmate has one final piece of information they haven't shared yet. Because shortly before leaving, the gray-haired man handed them a sealed envelope with your name written across the front. Inside was not money. Not a photograph. Not even a long letter. There was only a location, a date, and one short sentence. If they choose to come, everything begins there. Now the envelope becomes the center of everything, because your soulmate noticed one tiny detail that completely changed what they thought the invitation meant. Beneath the location and date was a symbol they recognized. They had seen it once before. Attached to the same organization the gray-haired man had quietly helped build years ago. Suddenly, his identity became clearer. He wasn't simply an experienced guide looking for promising people. He was connected to a circle of creators, thinkers, and mentors who searched for ideas capable of becoming something meaningful. But why had the invitation been given to your soulmate instead of directly to you? That question matters. Stay a little longer, because the answer surprised even them. The gray-haired man wanted your choice to remain completely yours. No pressure. No grand promises. No attempt to convince you that one particular future was guaranteed. He simply wanted the invitation to reach you through someone who understood you well enough to say, "Look at this possibility, then decide for yourself." Your soulmate stared at the envelope differently after hearing that. For the first time, they understood that the entire mystery had never been about someone arriving to rescue your future. It was about someone recognizing that you could build it. And then another detail surfaced. The meeting wasn't arranged only for you. Several people had been invited. Yet your invitation carried something theirs didn't, a handwritten mark beside your name. Your soulmate asked what it meant. The gray-haired man answered, "That one gets the second conversation. Don't skip now." The first meeting would introduce an idea. The second conversation would happen only if you showed genuine curiosity about it. That was the opportunity he had been protecting from unnecessary attention, not a guaranteed destination, but a chance to explore something potentially transformative. Your soulmate finally understood why your past decisions mattered so much. The gray-haired man wasn't measuring how impressive your story sounded. He was looking for evidence that when an unfamiliar door appeared, you wouldn't immediately reject it simply because you couldn't see everything waiting beyond it. What if this is the deeper message hidden inside the entire story? Perhaps your next chapter won't arrive looking exactly how you imagined. Perhaps it begins with curiosity. A conversation. A question. A possibility you almost overlook. And if this journey has kept you wondering what you would choose, share it with someone who needs a reminder that new possibilities can appear unexpectedly. Tell me in the comments what you think the gray-haired man will reveal, and subscribe if you want to stay connected as the final pieces come together. Because something huge is waiting for you. Your soulmate eventually turned the envelope over. There was writing on the back. Just one sentence. Tell them the invitation isn't the opportunity. Your soulmate read it twice. Then 3 times. If the invitation wasn't the opportunity, what was? They immediately contacted the gray-haired man and asked him. His response changed the entire story. The invitation only brings them into the room. A pause followed. Then he added. What happens after they enter depends on what they notice. Suddenly, everything made sense. The gray-haired man didn't want you because he had already decided your future. He wanted you there because he believed you might see something everyone else missed. But your soulmate still had one question. And what exactly should they be looking for? For the first time, the gray-haired man refused to answer. He simply smiled and said, "If I tell them, they'll look for my answer instead of discovering their own." And that is when your soulmate realized the greatest revelation was still ahead. Because somewhere inside that meeting was a choice meant specifically for you. And nobody, not even the gray-haired man, could make it on your behalf. Then came the detail nobody had prepared your soulmate for. The gray-haired man had deliberately left one chair empty in that room. Not because someone had cancelled. Not because the guest list was incomplete. That chair had been reserved from the beginning, and beside it rested a small card carrying only one word. Observe. Your soulmate finally understood what the man had been trying to accomplish. He didn't want you walking into that meeting believing you needed to impress anyone. He wanted you to watch. Listen. Notice what others overlooked. Because somewhere inside those conversations was the real reason your name had remained when the second name was crossed away. Stay with this moment, because the answer was closer than anyone realized. The gray-haired man explained that everyone entering the room would hear the same information. They would see the same presentation and be offered the same chance to ask questions. But he believed you would ask a different question. Your soulmate almost laughed from confusion. How could you possibly know that? The man didn't hesitate. Because of the story you told me about them. There it was again. That forgotten decision from your past. Something you had considered a normal moment had revealed a pattern about you. When everyone else focused on what was obvious, you searched for what wasn't being said. You questioned assumptions. You looked beneath appearances. And that was precisely what this future opportunity required. Don't skip now, because the mystery of why he wants you is finally beginning to open. The gray-haired man wasn't searching for someone who already knew everything. He wanted someone willing to ask what nobody else thought to ask. Someone willing to learn. Someone capable of seeing an unfinished possibility and imagining what it might become. Your soulmate suddenly realized the gray-haired man had never been evaluating your past. He had been using your past to understand how you might approach the future. And then the man revealed something even more unexpected. The project behind that mysterious meeting wasn't finished. In fact, one crucial piece was deliberately missing. An idea. A perspective. A new direction. That was why he couldn't tell your soulmate what you were supposed to notice. If he explained the missing piece beforehand, whatever you offered would simply become an echo of his thinking. He wanted your authentic response. Your own vision. Something nobody could place inside your mind before you entered that room. Wait till the final moment, because your soulmate then asked the question that had been building from the beginning. What happens if they don't see what you're hoping they'll see? The gray-haired man became quiet. Then came perhaps the most important answer yet. Nothing. Your soulmate stared at him. He continued. They walk away knowing they were invited because someone recognized potential in them. There is no wrong choice. And suddenly, the mystery became something completely different. This wasn't destiny forcing you toward one outcome. It was possibility asking whether you wanted to explore. The gray-haired man didn't want ownership of your future. He wanted you to recognize that your future contained more than one road. But just when your soulmate believed they finally understood everything, the man reached into an old folder and removed a document. Across the top was a date. Your soulmate immediately noticed something impossible to ignore. That document had been created before your soulmate ever mentioned your name to him. They looked up slowly. If I never told you about them. A pause. Then who did? The gray-haired man closed the folder. And for the first time since this mystery began, his expression changed. He answered with 4 quiet words. That's the final connection. And now the final connection steps out of the shadows, not as another mystery meant to confuse you, but as the missing piece that makes every earlier detail fall into place. Your soulmate leaned forward, waiting for the gray-haired man to explain who had spoken your name first. They expected another mentor, perhaps someone connected to the project. Instead, he opened the old folder again and pointed toward a short note written beside your name. Recommended through a chain of conversations. Not one person. Several. That changed everything. Stay a little longer, because this is where the story becomes bigger than one mysterious meeting. At different moments, people had remembered something about you. One remembered a question you once asked. Another remembered how you approached an unexpected problem. Someone else mentioned the way you saw possibilities where others saw limitations. None of them knew their separate observations would eventually reach the same person. But they did. And when the gray-haired man heard your name again from your soulmate, he realized something unusual was happening, not something supernatural, but something remarkably human. Your character had traveled farther than your introduction. Think about that carefully. You may never know every conversation in which someone remembers your kindness, curiosity, determination, or perspective. You may believe your smallest choices disappear the moment they happen. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they become your introduction in rooms you haven't entered yet. Your soulmate suddenly understood why the gray-haired man had seemed so certain from the beginning. He wasn't making a judgment based on one dramatic story. He had heard different pieces from different directions, and strangely, they all described the same quality. You notice what matters. But before you go, there is one final turn. Your soulmate asked, "So what do you actually want from them?" The gray-haired man looked toward the empty chair. Then he answered. Nothing they don't freely choose to give. He wanted your perspective. Your questions. Your ideas. And if the opportunity felt right, perhaps your participation. Nothing more. That answer finally removed the mystery surrounding his intentions. He wasn't coming to take something from your life. He wanted to discover whether your vision could add something meaningful to an unfinished idea. Your soulmate smiled, but another question remained. What if they aren't ready? The gray-haired man gently closed the folder. Readiness isn't knowing everything before you begin. Sometimes readiness is simply being willing to learn. Those words stayed in the room. Because perhaps that is what this entire journey has been pointing toward. The gray-haired man was never the true center of this story. Neither was the envelope. Neither was the meeting. You were. Your choices created the clues. Your character created the recommendation. Your curiosity created the reason he wanted you in that room. And now the future remains exactly where it belongs, in your hands. So when an unexpected conversation arrives, when someone introduces you to a possibility you never planned for, remember this story. Listen carefully. Ask questions. Don't assume that unfamiliar means impossible. Because sometimes a new chapter doesn't announce itself by saying, "This will change everything." Sometimes it quietly asks, "Would you like to see what's possible?" And somewhere in that imagined room, the gray-haired man is no longer waiting for the person everyone told him about. He's waiting to finally meet the person behind the name. You, just when your soulmate believed the mystery had reached its final page, one last conversation changed the meaning of the empty chair completely. The gray-haired man looked at your soulmate and said, "There is something I haven't explained about that meeting." Your soulmate stopped. Every previous clue suddenly felt unfinished again. "What haven't you told me?" The man turned toward the window, gathering his thoughts before answering. "I won't be sitting at the head of the table." That sounded like a minor detail. It wasn't. Stay with this, because the person occupying that seat was connected to the real opportunity, and your soulmate had misunderstood the gray-haired man's role from the beginning. He wasn't the person making the final decision. He was the person opening the door. The individual at the head of that table would be someone your soulmate had never met, someone searching for a fresh perspective on an idea that had reached a crossroads. Several experienced minds had already studied it. They had offered logical answers, careful plans, predictable solutions. Yet something was still missing. Then the gray-haired man heard about you. Not because you supposedly possessed some magical answer, but because your way of thinking seemed different from the pattern already inside that room. Don't skip this moment. Your soulmate asked, "What happens when they arrive?" The man smiled. Nothing dramatic. At first, everyone would introduce themselves. The conversation would begin normally. Ideas would move around the table. People would explain what they believed should happen next. And you? You would simply be given permission to listen. But somewhere during that conversation, the person at the head of the table would ask everyone the same question. The gray-haired man wouldn't reveal the question beforehand. He only gave your soulmate one clue. Most people will answer with what they know. "I want to hear what your person notices." That distinction stayed with your soulmate. Knowing gives information. Noticing reveals perspective. And suddenly, the mysterious card beside the empty chair made perfect sense. Observe. Something huge is waiting for you inside that word. Because sometimes your greatest advantage isn't having the fastest answer. It is noticing the question beneath the question. Seeing the overlooked detail. Understanding that a future possibility may require imagination before certainty. Your soulmate finally asked, "And if their answer surprises everyone?" The gray-haired man's expression softened. Then the second conversation begins. There it was. The phrase that had appeared much earlier. The second conversation. It wasn't guaranteed. It wasn't some predetermined destiny. It was simply another door that could open if your perspective genuinely connected with what the room needed. Your soulmate looked again at the invitation. For the first time, they weren't wondering why the gray-haired man wanted you. They were wondering what you might discover about yourself when you finally entered that room. And before leaving, the man gave your soulmate one final message to pass along. Tell them not to arrive trying to become impressive. Tell them to arrive curious. Because the moment you stop trying to predict exactly what everyone expects, something changes. You begin thinking freely. You begin noticing differently. You begin bringing the one thing nobody else in that room can duplicate: your perspective. And perhaps that was the secret hidden beneath this entire mystery. The gray-haired man didn't search for another version of someone already successful. He searched for a voice the room hadn't heard yet. And somehow, that search led to you. What happened next was never written on the invitation. Because the gray-haired man had prepared one final surprise for the moment you entered that room. Your soulmate discovered it almost accidentally. While returning the old folder, they noticed a page tucked behind the original list of names. Across the top were 3 words. The unasked question. Your soulmate looked at the gray-haired man. What does this mean? His answer was immediate. That is why I chose the empty chair. Stay a little longer, because this changes what the meeting represents. For months, the people behind that unfinished idea had been searching for answers. They analyzed possibilities. They compared approaches. They discussed what should happen next. Yet the gray-haired man believed they were making one fundamental mistake. They were answering the questions they already understood. Nobody was asking the question that could change the direction of the conversation. And he believed a completely new perspective might notice it. That was where you entered the picture. Your soulmate asked, but how can you expect one person to discover something an entire room hasn't? The gray-haired man shook his head. I don't expect it. I want to make space for it. Remember those words. Because there is a huge difference between someone demanding greatness from you and someone simply creating enough room for your authentic thinking to appear. Don't skip now, the next detail explains why your name kept resurfacing. Every story the gray-haired man heard about you contained the same pattern. You weren't remembered for having perfect answers. People remembered you because you sometimes looked at familiar situations from an unfamiliar angle. Where others asked, "Can this work?" you wondered, what would make it work differently? Where others focused entirely on the present, you considered what might become possible later. That quality was exactly what the unfinished project lacked. Your soulmate finally understood. The gray-haired man didn't want you because he knew what you would say. He wanted you because he didn't know. That uncertainty was the entire point. Then your soulmate noticed another line beneath the heading. Do not give them the background until after their first observation. Wait, why? Wouldn't more information help? The gray-haired man explained that sometimes too much context can quietly teach someone what they're supposed to notice. He wanted your first reaction untouched by everyone else's assumptions. Your soulmate smiled. So you're not testing them? No. Evaluating them? Not in the way you think. Then what are you doing? The gray-haired man paused before giving the clearest answer yet. Listening. And suddenly, the entire mystery became beautifully simple. Someone had finally created a room where your perspective wouldn't need to compete with your past. No old labels. No expectations about who you should become. Just one opportunity to look at something unfamiliar and say what you genuinely see. But before your soulmate left, they discovered one more thing. The gray-haired man took the invitation back for a moment and wrote a new sentence beneath the date. He handed it over. Your soulmate read the words slowly. Come with one question you have never been brave enough to ask about your own future. For the first time, your soulmate stopped thinking about the meeting. They started thinking about your answer. What question would you bring? What possibility have you quietly wondered about? What direction have you never explored simply because nobody invited you to imagine it? And that is why this story still isn't finished. Because the next revelation isn't hidden inside the gray-haired man's folder. It isn't written on the invitation. It isn't even waiting inside that mysterious room. The next revelation begins with the question you choose to carry through the door, but there was another name hidden beneath yours, and this time, your soulmate recognized it immediately. They had returned to the folder for one final look, expecting nothing new. Yet when the gray-haired man unfolded the last page, a handwritten note appeared beneath your invitation record. Ask them about the person who believed first. Your soulmate's expression changed. Because they knew exactly what that meant. Long before this mysterious invitation, before anyone discussed your potential, there had been someone who noticed something different in you. Not necessarily your achievements. Not some perfect version of you. They noticed the way your mind kept reaching beyond what was directly in front of you. And somehow, a story from that person had traveled forward. Don't skip this part, because your soulmate was about to discover how the entire chain actually began. The gray-haired man explained that years earlier, during an ordinary conversation, someone had described a person who possessed an unusual combination. Patience enough to listen, curiosity enough to question, and imagination enough to see what hadn't been built yet. No invitation existed then. No meeting had been planned. Your name was simply remembered. Then, much later, when the unfinished project reached its crossroads, the gray-haired man heard a similar description from another person. Then another. Finally, your soulmate mentioned you without knowing any of this history. 3 separate paths. One repeating name. Yours. Stay till the end, because this wasn't proof that some fixed future had already been chosen for you. It meant something more grounded, and perhaps more powerful. The way you show up in ordinary moments can leave echoes. A thoughtful question can be remembered. A creative idea can travel. The way you treat people can become part of how they describe you when you're nowhere near the conversation. Your soulmate suddenly understood why the gray-haired man had refused to give you the correct answer before the meeting. He wasn't interested in a rehearsed version of you. He wanted the person those stories had described. Then came another unexpected statement. There may be no immediate opportunity after the meeting. Your soulmate looked confused. Then why invite them? The gray-haired man answered calmly. Because sometimes the right conversation comes before the right opportunity. That changed everything again. The meeting wasn't a finish line. It was a beginning. Perhaps you would contribute an idea. Perhaps someone in that room would remember your question months later. Perhaps you would discover that the project wasn't right for you at all, but another direction suddenly was. The point was never to force one outcome. The point was to expand what you could see. And before your soulmate walked away, the gray-haired man finally revealed why he had kept that first recommendation for so long. He opened an old notebook. Beside your name was a sentence written long before today's mystery began. If the right room ever appears, remember this person. Your soulmate became silent. The gray-haired man closed the notebook and said, "The room finally appeared. But there was still one thing nobody expected. Your invitation contained a time. The meeting contained a question. And the empty chair was waiting. Yet the gray-haired man had intentionally left one space on your invitation completely blank. Your soulmate pointed toward it. What goes there?" The man smiled. Then came the answer that opened an entirely new chapter. Their idea. Then the gray-haired man did something your soulmate never expected. He took the invitation, turned it sideways, and drew a simple line through the blank space. Not to cancel it. To divide it into two halves. On one side, he wrote, "What exists?" On the other, "What could exist?" Your soulmate stared at those words, and suddenly the purpose of the meeting became clearer than ever. The blank space wasn't waiting for a perfect business plan, an impressive speech, or an answer prepared in advance. It was waiting for a possibility. Stay with this, because your soulmate finally asked the question nobody had asked throughout this entire journey. What if they arrive without an idea? The gray-haired man smiled. Then perhaps they leave with one. That answer changed the atmosphere completely. This was never supposed to be a performance. You weren't being invited into that room because everyone expected you to arrive carrying some extraordinary solution. You were being invited because sometimes the strongest ideas begin when a curious person encounters the right question at the right moment. And the gray-haired man believed curiosity was something you already carried. But then came a new revelation. The unfinished project wasn't struggling because nobody had ideas. It had too many. Everyone kept adding. More features. More possibilities. More directions. More complicated answers. The gray-haired man suspected the breakthrough might come from someone willing to ask. What can we remove? Your soulmate immediately remembered something about you. There had been moments when everyone around you complicated a situation, yet you searched for the simplest path forward. You didn't always need more information. Sometimes you needed clarity. Don't skip here, because that quality was the hidden reason your invitation had remained blank. The man didn't want to put his idea into your mind before you arrived. He wanted to know what your mind would do with the problem. Your soulmate asked, "So the blank space gets filled during the meeting?" Maybe. After? Possibly. What if it stays blank? The gray-haired man gave an unexpected answer. Then it stays blank.